The text message arrived at 6 p.m., right as I was finishing my shift at the Westbrook Police Department. Unknown number. 7 words that would dismantle my entire life. Ask your wife where she was Wednesday. I stared at the screen for maybe 30 seconds, my thumb hovering over the delete button. 14 years on the force teaches you things about people. The petty ones, the vindictive ones, the ones who can't accept that you put them away fair and square. I'd arrested plenty of lowlifes who swore they'd get back at me someday. This had all the hallmarks of exactly that kind of garbage. But I didn't delete it. Something cold settled in my gut. The same instinct that had kept me alive during a dozen close calls on the job. Nicole had texted me around 4, saying she had a department meeting at the marketing firm. Nothing unusual. She'd been having a lot of those lately. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. My wife of 12 years. The woman I'd built a life with. The woman who'd seemed distant lately. New gym routine that produced no visible results. Coming home later than usual with stories that felt rehearsed. That new lingerie I'd spotted in our closet last month. Expensive stuff, tags still on, sitting there like an accusation I couldn't name. Lawson, you coming to O'Reilly's? My colleague Martinez appeared at my desk, jacket already on. Celebrate closing the Patterson case? First round's on Kowalski. He bet me 20 you wouldn't crack it before the weekend. I forced a smile. Rain check. Got some paperwork to finish up. Paperwork? Martinez snorted. On a Friday? Nicole's gonna be thrilled you're missing another dinner to push files around. Yeah, well, I kept my voice light. Someone's gotta keep this department running. Martinez shook his head, already walking away. Don't stay too late. You look like death warmed over. I waited until the bullpen cleared out. Then I did something I told myself was just putting my mind at ease. 5 minutes, I thought. I'll check the traffic cams, see her car at her office, and forget this ever happened. I accessed the city's traffic camera network, legitimate access through my position, something I'd done 1,000 times for actual cases. I started at Nicole's office building at 4 p.m. and found her silver Audi Q5 leaving the parking garage at 4:12 p.m. But it didn't head toward our house. It didn't head toward the gym. It headed east, toward the Riverside district. My fingers moved mechanically across the keyboard while something inside me went very still. Camera after camera. Intersection after intersection. I tracked her route like I was following a suspect. Clinical, detached, my detective brain taking over while the husband part of me screamed to look away. She parked at the Avalon Heights apartment complex at 4:38 p.m. Her car didn't leave until 7:52 p.m., over 3 hours. This wasn't a quick errand. This was a destination. I ran the address through the department database, and the name that came back hit me like a baseball bat to the chest. Apartment 4C, Derek Holloway, my former partner. The man I'd worked with for 5 years. The man I'd trusted with my life during 100 dangerous situations. Armed suspects, sketchy drug busts. That one night in the warehouse district when everything went sideways and Derek pulled me behind a dumpster half a second before the shooting started. The man who was transferred out of my unit 18 months ago after our professional disagreement. My polite way of saying I'd caught him tampering with evidence and reported him to internal affairs. I sat there in the empty bullpen, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and I remembered things I'd dismissed years ago. The way Derek always looked at Nicole at department barbecues. The way his hand lingered on her back when they said goodbye. The time he'd bought her a birthday present. A silk scarf she'd mentioned wanting, and I'd thanked him for being thoughtful while something uneasy stirred in my gut. I'd chalked it up to Derek being Derek. Charming, friendly, a little too smooth with everyone's wife, but harmless. I'd been a fool. I didn't go home that night. I sat in my car in the precinct parking lot, engine off, staring at the timestamp on my phone. 4:38 p.m. to 7:52 p.m. 3 hours and 14 minutes. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was worse. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally see the picture you've been looking at upside down your whole life. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing had happened. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. The routine we'd established over 12 years of marriage, back when things were good. Back when I thought they were good. Nicole came downstairs in her robe, hair still wet from the shower. She kissed my cheek the way she did every morning, the way she'd done yesterday before driving to her lover's apartment. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Tough case yesterday." She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching me with those green eyes that used to make my heart skip. "Everything okay? You seem off." I looked at her, really looked at her, and searched for some sign of guilt. Some tell. The micro-expressions I'd learned to read in interrogation rooms. Anything that would confirm what I already knew. But her face was perfectly composed. Loving, even. Concerned. Like she actually cared about my well-being. 12 years. She'd been lying to me long enough that it had become as natural as breathing. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just tired." "Well, don't work too hard." She smiled that smile I used to think was meant only for me. "I've got another late meeting Friday, but maybe Saturday we can do something. Dinner out? That Italian place you like?" "Sounds good." She kissed me again, longer this time, almost tender, and headed upstairs to get ready for work. I stood at the sink, washing dishes, and made myself a promise. I wouldn't confront her. A good detective never tips his hand. I needed evidence, irrefutable, undeniable, not for court, for myself. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made a move. The next few days were an exercise in controlled torture. I watched Nicole move through our home like she'd been doing for years, cooking dinner, watching TV, asking about my day, and cataloged every lie, every late meeting, every drinks with the girls, every excuse that had seemed perfectly reasonable before and now rang hollow as a church bell in an empty room. Thursday night, she told me she'd be at a client dinner. "New account," she explained, touching up her makeup in the bathroom mirror while I stood in the doorway. "Japanese investors, very formal, might run late." "No problem. I'll leave some food in the fridge." She turned, lipstick in hand. "You're being so understanding lately. I appreciate it." I nearly laughed. Understanding, that's what she called it. "I know your job is demanding," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "We both make sacrifices." She kissed me goodbye an hour later, smelling like the perfume she used to wear on our anniversaries. I watched her car pull out of the driveway and waited exactly 3 minutes. Then I called a buddy at the precinct. "Hey Garcia, quick favor. That traffic cam access you were asking about last week? I've got the codes. But I need you to cover for me if anyone asks. Just say I was chasing down a lead on the Patterson aftermath." "You got it, Lawson. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just tying up loose ends." Friday afternoon, I told Nicole I was working a double shift. Instead, I parked 3 blocks from the Avalon Heights complex with a telephoto lens I'd borrowed from the department's surveillance kit. At 4:45 p.m., right on schedule, Nicole's Audi pulled into the parking garage. I photographed everything. The car, the timestamp, the building entrance where a doorman waved her through like she was a regular visitor. Then I waited. At 5:30 p.m., Derek arrived home. But he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. For one wild moment, hope surged through me. Maybe Nicole was visiting someone else in the building. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Then Derek kissed the woman on the cheek, a quick, familiar peck, and she drove away. I recognized her from old photos. Amanda, Derek's younger sister. She'd been at a few department functions back when Derek and I were partners. Derek went inside. A minute later, the lights in 4C came on. Through the window, I saw two silhouettes. The shorter one moved toward the taller one. They embraced. The kiss lasted long enough to remove any remaining doubt. Every instinct told me to storm up there, kick down the door, beat the living hell out of the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. I could feel it building in my chest. The rage, the betrayal, the visceral need to make someone pay. But I'm not a man who acts on emotion. I've seen too many cases blown by cops who couldn't control themselves, too many convictions thrown out because someone got sloppy in the heat of the moment. I sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking. Then I drove home to wait for my wife. Over the next 4 days, I conducted the most thorough investigation of my career. Not a criminal case this time, a personal one. But the methodology was the same. Follow the evidence, document everything, let the facts tell the story. I set up a war room in the spare bedroom. Bought a whiteboard from Office Depot, hung it on the wall, started mapping connections like I was tracking a serial offender. Dates on one side, locations on the other, lines connecting everything. My brother called on Tuesday, wanting to know if I was coming to Sunday dinner. Maybe, I said, staring at the timeline I'd constructed. Work stuff. You sound weird, Jer. Everything okay with you and Nicole? Fine, everything's fine. He didn't push. That's one thing about family. They can sense when you need space, even if they don't know why. The phone records came first. Nicole was on my family plan, so I had legitimate access. What I found made my stomach turn. Text frequency to Derek's number had exploded 18 months ago, right after his transfer. Before that, maybe 1 or 2 texts a month, the kind of casual communication between a cop and his partner's wife. After, hundreds, thousands. All while I was at work, putting in overtime, trying to provide for our family. I pulled the call logs next. Hours of conversations. Some starting at midnight. Some lasting until 3 in the morning, nights when I'd come home from a double shift to find Nicole already asleep, and I'd kissed her forehead and felt grateful she was waiting for me. She hadn't been waiting. She'd been finishing up with him. Then I pulled Derek's personnel file. I'd reported him for evidence tampering 2 years ago. The investigation was inconclusive. Not enough to fire him, but enough to get him moved to desk duty at another precinct. He'd blamed me for destroying his career. But here's what made my blood run cold. The timeline. The affair started before the investigation. Derek was already sleeping with Nicole when I noticed the discrepancies in his casework. When I reported him, thinking I was just doing my job, protecting the integrity of our cases, he was already living a double life with my wife. Which meant one of two things. Either my investigation had nothing to do with the affair, or, and this thought kept me up at night, I'd started noticing problems with Derek's work because some part of me was already suspicious about him. Some instinct I couldn't articulate had been screaming at me to look closer. Either way, the falling out wasn't the cause of the affair. The affair was the disease that infected everything. The financial trail was almost as damning. Joint credit card statements showed business lunches at restaurants I'd never heard of. Cash withdrawals, lots of them. Money disappearing from our account like water through a sieve. I cross-referenced the withdrawal dates with Derek's schedule. Perfect correlation. Every time Nicole pulled cash, Derek had the day off. She'd been funding her betrayal with our money. The money I earned working nights and weekends while she was in another man's bed. I started keeping a detailed file, dates, times, evidence. This wasn't about revenge yet. This was about preparation. 9 days after that first text message, I finally tracked down the anonymous tipper. The phone was a burner, purchased at a convenience store downtown. But the store had security cameras, grainy, low quality, but workable. And the buyer? Amanda Holloway, Derek's own sister. I reached out through a mutual contact and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop across town, someplace neither of us would be recognized. She showed up looking nervous, clutching her purse like a shield. Mid-20s, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, eyes that kept darting to the door like she was waiting for someone to burst in. "Detective Lawson," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you'd want to talk. You sent me that text." She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I found out about 2 months ago. Saw some messages on Derek's phone when he left it unlocked." She finally looked up at me. "I confronted him, told him it was wrong, that you didn't deserve this. He told me to mind my own business. So you reached out to me. I couldn't live with it." Her voice cracked. "You seemed like a good man. Every time I saw you at those department events, you were always kind. Always treated me like a person, not just Derek's kid sister. You asked about my job, remembered I was going back to school." She stopped, pressing her lips together. "And meanwhile, my brother was—" "How long?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" "Almost 2 years. Derek brags about it to his friends. Says Nicole is his now and you're too—" She winced. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it. He says you're too stupid to see it. That he's been taking your wife right under your nose and you're too busy playing hero cop to notice." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Detective. I should have told you sooner." I absorbed that like a punch to the gut. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a rough patch in my marriage that Derek had exploited. This was a calculated betrayal by 2 people who had been laughing at me for years. "There's more," Amanda said quietly. "Nicole's talked about leaving you. She wants to wait for the right time. And Derek mentioned they're planning a trip together, somewhere tropical. A test run for their future, he called it. A test run. Like they're already planning their life after you." She looked at me with something like pity. "I couldn't watch them do that. You deserve to know." I thanked her. My voice was steady. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. The next morning, I made an appointment with Preston Burke, a divorce attorney known for handling high-conflict cases. His office was downtown, all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of place that screamed money and discretion. His receptionist, a severe woman with reading glasses and a protective attitude, looked me up and down when I walked in. "Detective Lawson, Mr. Burke will see you now." Burke was younger than I expected. Maybe 45, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of calm demeanor that probably served him well in custody battles. He shook my hand and gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine." "All right then." He settled into his chair. "Your message said this was urgent. What are we dealing with?" I laid out my evidence on his desk. The photographs, the phone records, the financial discrepancies, the timeline. Burke reviewed everything with the practiced eye of a man who'd seen every flavor of marital disaster. He took his time, making notes, occasionally raising an eyebrow. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Detective Lawson, I'm going to be honest with you. I've handled a lot of these cases. Most people come to me with suspicions and hurt feelings. Maybe a credit card statement from a hotel they didn't stay at. Maybe a text message that doesn't quite add up." He tapped the folder of evidence. "You've come with a prosecutable file. Everything documented, everything time-stamped, everything obtained through legitimate channels. Whatever you decide to do, you're in the strongest possible position. What about the house? You made the down payment from your inheritance, correct? And you've been the primary earner? For 10 years. Nicole contributed maybe 30% of our total household income. Then the house is defensible. We can structure this so you keep it or buy her out at fair value." Burke steepled his fingers. "And given that her affair partner was your workplace colleague, someone you reported for misconduct, there may be additional considerations regarding workplace ethics. I'm not saying we'd use that, but it's leverage. Alimony? In a no-fault state, infidelity doesn't automatically disqualify a claim. But with this level of documentation, the secret phone, the financial discrepancies, the duration of the deception, any judge is going to look unfavorably on her position, especially if she has a full-time job. I started separating finances that week. New accounts in my name only. Moved my father's inheritance, money Nicole never had claim to anyway, into a protected trust. I documented every joint purchase, every contribution to the household. While reviewing financial documents, I found a receipt from a pharmacy dated 3 weeks prior. A pregnancy test. My heart stopped for a full 5 seconds before I checked Nicole's medical records. She'd added me to her patient portal years ago, back when we were still a team. Back when we were trying for a baby that never came. The test was negative. But the implication hung in the air like smoke. They weren't being careful. My wife and my former partner had been risking bringing a child into this disaster. For the first time since this all started, I felt something other than cold determination. I felt sick. I started sleeping in the guest room, citing back problems. "You should see a chiropractor," Nicole said, her voice all concern. "That's not like you. Just stress. It'll pass." She didn't question it further. If anything, she seemed relieved. Probably made it easier for her to text Derek without worrying about me seeing her screen. I'd become a ghost in my own home, watching, waiting, preparing. One evening, while Nicole was in the shower, I found her purse on the kitchen counter. A slight bulge caught my eye. Something that didn't fit the usual contents. I opened it carefully and found a second phone hidden in the interior pocket. A burner. Just like the one Amanda had used to contact me. I didn't touch it. Didn't try to access it. Contaminating evidence could backfire later. But now I knew. She was maintaining a completely separate line of communication. A whole secret life, right under my nose. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt something closer to gratitude. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of any sympathy I might have felt. I did a deep background check on Derek that week. What I found confirmed what I'd always suspected about him. 2 previous relationships, both ended with infidelity. Derek was the cheater both times. His ex-girlfriend, a woman named Taylor Webb, had filed a harassment complaint when Derek wouldn't accept the breakup. The complaint was eventually dropped. She moved to another state, probably just to get away from him. But the pattern was clear. Derek wasn't in love with Nicole. He was in love with winning. With taking. With proving he was better than everyone else. Nicole wasn't special to him. She was a trophy. Proof that Derek could take something from the man who had ruined him by reporting his misconduct. And Nicole? She thought she'd found her soulmate. She had no idea she was just a pawn in Derek's ego game. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I waited until a Friday, Nicole's usual meeting day. The night before, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, from anticipation. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, running through scenarios, preparing for every possible response. This was going to be the performance of my life. I had the divorce papers drawn up and ready. I changed the locks on the house, legally permissible once I'd filed the paperwork. I packed Nicole's belongings neatly into suitcases, clothes, personal items, nothing more. No jewelry I'd given her, no photos of us, just the essentials. Around noon, I called Martinez at the precinct. "Hey, I'm taking a personal day. Cover for me if anyone asks." "Everything okay?" "Just some house stuff. Nothing major." I spent the afternoon getting the porch ready, arranged her suitcases in a neat row, made sure the new locks were working, grabbed a beer from the fridge, the good stuff, the craft IPA I saved for special occasions, and settled into the porch swing to wait. Then I waited on the porch, drinking a beer as the sun went down. She came home at 8 p.m., probably expecting a quiet evening. Maybe she'd planned to tell me about her meeting over a glass of wine, spinning another story while I nodded and pretended to believe her. Instead, she found her suitcases on the porch. I was standing in the doorway. The look on her face, confusion, then shock, then the dawning horror of realization, was almost worth the 2 years of lies. "Jared?" Her voice was high, thin. "What's going on? Why are my things—" I handed her the divorce papers. 12 years. 2 of them with Derek. "Sign these or don't. I've already filed." "What?" She actually laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "What are you talking about? This is insane. Whatever you think happened." "I don't think anything, Nicole. I know." She tried denial first. It's always the first card they play. "I don't know what you're— Derek? Your old partner? Are you serious right now?" "This is crazy, Jared. You're having some kind of breakdown." I said nothing. Just waited. "Maybe we should talk about this inside," she tried. "I don't know what you think you know, but there has to be an explanation." 3 hours and 14 minutes. My voice was calm, detached. The same tone I used when reading suspects their rights. "That's how long your car was at his apartment building on Wednesday, and Thursday, and every Friday for the past 4 months. I have photographs, time-stamped." Her face went white. "I have phone records showing hundreds of texts, hours of calls, some of them at 3 in the morning, while I was sleeping in the next room. I have financial statements showing cash withdrawals you couldn't explain to save your life." She took a step back. "I have a notarized statement from Amanda Holloway describing how her brother brags to his friends about sleeping with my wife. How he says you're his now, and I'm too stupid to see it." "Amanda?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Derek's sister told you?" She couldn't live with it. Some people have integrity. Nicole's face cycled through emotions: shock, fear, and then something uglier. Calculation. "You were spying on me?" Suddenly she was angry, pivoting to blame. "You had no right to— Traffic cameras are public record. Your phone is on my family plan. Every piece of evidence I have was obtained legally." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Did you think I was stupid, Nicole? Did you think 14 years as a detective taught me nothing?" "You were never home." The words exploded out of her. "You cared more about your cases than you ever cared about me. Every time I needed you, you were at work or on call or chasing some lowlife through the streets. Derek actually saw me. Derek actually listened. Then you should have asked for a divorce. Instead, you spent 2 years lying to my face while emptying our bank account to fund your affair. It wasn't like that. Save it for someone who cares." Her mouth snapped shut. "Here's how this is going to work," I said. "You're going to take these papers to a lawyer. You're going to sign them. You're not going to fight me on the house because you know I'll bury you with evidence if you try. And then you're going to take whatever's left of your dignity and walk away." "Jared," her voice broke, "please. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. We can work through this. Couples survive this kind of thing. We can go to counseling. We're not couples. We're done. I'll fight this." Suddenly, her eyes hardened. "I'll tell the department you used police resources to spy on me. I'll tell Internal Affairs. Go ahead. Tell them how you've been sleeping with a cop who's under investigation for evidence tampering. Tell them about the burner phone you keep in your purse to coordinate your affair. Tell them all of it." I leaned closer, close enough to see the panic in her eyes. "I documented everything, Nicole. Every access log, every camera I checked, all within proper protocols. But if you want to drag this into Internal Affairs, if you want everyone in the department to know exactly what kind of person you are, be my guest." She had nothing. I'd thought of everything. The last thing I saw as I closed the door was her standing on the porch, divorce papers in her shaking hands, her perfect life crumbling around her. I poured myself another beer and sat down in my living room now, and felt nothing but a cold, quiet satisfaction. The next few weeks were satisfying. There's no other word for it. I didn't go after Derek directly. That would have been petty and potentially actionable. But I didn't need to. The evidence tampering case I'd reported 2 years ago had been inconclusive at the time, but I'd kept my own notes. Documented discrepancies. Patterns that suggested more than just carelessness. I brought my concerns to my lieutenant through proper channels. "I've been reviewing some of my old cases," I told him. "The ones from when Holloway was my partner. I found some inconsistencies I think warrant another look." Lieutenant Patterson was a by-the-book cop who'd never liked Derek anyway. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Evidence that should have been logged wasn't. Chain of custody gaps. A few cases where the timeline doesn't add up." I handed him the folder I'd prepared. Nothing conclusive on its own, but together? Patterson flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. "I always thought that investigation got shut down too fast." So did I. Within a week, they'd found enough to reopen the case. This time, with fresh eyes and better tools, the evidence was clearer. Derek was placed on administrative leave pending review. But that wasn't even the best part. The investigation uncovered more than just evidence tampering. Derek had been running a side business using department resources, selling information to a bail bondsman. Nothing major in the grand scheme of things, but more than enough to end a career and open a criminal investigation. The affair was the least of Derek's sins. He confronted me in the precinct parking lot 2 weeks later. I'd been expecting it. Derek never could handle losing. The man had an ego the size of Montana, and watching his career implode while his former partner walked free must have been eating him alive. He was waiting by my car when I came off shift, shoulders hunched, jaw tight. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Eyes bloodshot, stubble thick on his jaw, clothes wrinkled like he'd been wearing them for a week. "Good. Lawson." He pushed off the hood of my car as I approached. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "You think you're clever, don't you?" He stepped into my path, close enough that I could smell the bourbon on his breath. "Reopening that investigation. Getting me suspended. You ruined everything." "You ruined everything, Derek. I just documented it." "You did this," he snarled, getting in my face. "You couldn't stand that she chose me, so you destroyed my career." "She didn't choose you, Derek." I kept my voice calm, bored even. "She chose to betray her marriage. You were just convenient." "Convenient?" He laughed bitterly. "I was everything you couldn't be. Attentive, exciting. I made her feel alive while you were buried in paperwork and cold cases. You made her feel special while you were running at least 3 dating profiles on the side. I found them, by the way. Very creative usernames. Tall dark cop." "Really? That's what you went with?" His face went slack. "What, you didn't think I'd look?" "Nicole was just another conquest, Derek. Another trophy for your wall. The only reason you went after her is because she was mine, and you couldn't stand that I reported you." "That's not—" He stopped, his mouth working like he couldn't figure out what to say. "She loved me. She loved the attention. There's a difference. You ruined my life." "No, you ruined your life. You tampered with evidence. You sold information to bail bondsmen. You slept with your partner's wife." I shrugged. "I just documented it." He swung at me. I'd been waiting for it. I sidestepped easily. Derek was fast, but I was faster, and watched him stumble past me, nearly falling on the asphalt. "Security cameras," I said, pointing to the corner of the building. "Every angle. You sure you want to add assault to your charges?" He stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched. For a moment I thought he might try again. Then his shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. "She's not worth it," he said quietly. "Neither of you are." He walked away. 3 days later, he was formally terminated from the force. Criminal charges pending. Nicole tried to fight the divorce at first. She hired an aggressive attorney, one of those types who advertises on bus benches and promises to fight for you, claimed emotional distress, demanded half of everything. Her attorney filed motion after motion, delaying tactics mostly, requests for document production, subpoenas for my work records, an attempt to depose Martinez about my state of mind. Burke handled it all with surgical precision. "They're fishing," he told me after the second round of motions. "Her attorney knows she doesn't have a case, so he's hoping to find something, anything, that makes you look bad. Don't take the bait." I didn't take the bait. The actual court date came on a cold Tuesday morning. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Honorable Margaret Ellis, who'd clearly seen every trick in the book, reviewed my documentation with increasing displeasure. The photographs, the phone records, the financial discrepancies, the separate phone. Nicole's attorney tried every argument in the playbook. "Your Honor, my client was in an emotionally vulnerable state. Counselor," Judge Ellis cut him off. "Your client maintained a secret telephone specifically to coordinate a 2-year affair with her husband's workplace colleague while systematically withdrawing cash from their joint accounts. I'm not inclined to reward that behavior with additional sympathy. The defendant's surveillance methods were entirely legal. Traffic cameras are public record. Phone records were from a shared family plan. There's nothing actionable here." Nicole's attorney tried once more. "My client has made significant contributions to the household and deserves equitable. Your client contributed 30% of household income while her husband worked overtime to provide for them. She spent 2 years deceiving him while depleting their joint assets for personal use." Judge Ellis shuffled her papers. "Her alimony claim is denied. She has a full-time job. She committed documented adultery. I'm granting the petitioner's request for asset division as proposed." Nicole's face crumpled. Her attorney whispered something to her. She shook her head. "The house stayed with me. I paid Nicole her 30% share of equity, a check I handed to her attorney without comment. And that was the end of it." Outside the courthouse, Nicole tried to approach me. "Jared, please." I walked past her without a word. Burke fell into step beside me. "Cleaner than most," he said. "You should feel good about this." I didn't feel anything. Not yet. That would come later, when the numbness wore off and I could finally process what 12 years of marriage had come down to. A month later, I heard through the grapevine that Nicole's employer had encouraged her to resign. Something about an ethics violation. Dating a police officer while married to another police officer in the same department created liability issues, apparently. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. She showed up at my door one last time, about 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. It was a Sunday evening. I'd just finished dinner. Take-out Thai, because Rachel was visiting her sister that weekend, and was settling in to watch the game when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost weight. Too much weight. Her hair was different, shorter, like she'd chopped it off in a fit of desperation. The designer clothes she used to wear had been replaced by something that looked like it came from a thrift store. The confident, polished woman I'd married had been replaced by someone who looked hollow. "Jared?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" Part of me wanted to close the door in her face. Part of me, a smaller part, one I didn't like acknowledging, wanted to know what she had to say. I leaned against the door frame, making no move to invite her inside. "About what?" "About everything." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand." "Understand what, Nicole?" "How it happened." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. How I became someone who could do that. I don't think I care anymore. Please. The word was almost a sob. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. And then I'll leave, and you'll never see me again. Against my better judgment, I stepped back and let her in. She stood in the living room, our living room, once, looking at the changes I'd made. New couch, different artwork, all traces of her erased. It looks different, she said quietly. Things change. She turned to face me. He made me feel seen, Jared. For the first time in years, someone was paying attention to me. You were always working, always distracted, and he was there. He listened. He cared. He cared about winning. That's all you ever were to him. A way to beat me. That's not true. Then why did he dump you the second things got hard? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I tried to reconnect with him, she admitted, voice breaking. After everything fell apart, I don't know what I thought. That we'd figure it out together. That he'd be there for me when I needed him. And he blamed me. Said if I'd been more careful, none of this would have happened. He called me a liability. She laughed bitterly. I gave up everything for him, and I was a liability. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, maybe. Vindication. But standing there looking at the woman I'd once loved, the woman who'd shattered that love into a million pieces, all I felt was tired. What do you want, Nicole? A second chance. The words tumbled out in a rush. I know I don't deserve it. But we had 12 good years, Jared. 12 years of building something together. That has to count for something. We could start over. No. Please. The mistake wasn't getting caught. I cut her off, my voice flat and final. The mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice. Thinking I'd be too stupid, too blind, too in love to see who you really are. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. But I see you now, I said, and I don't recognize the person you've become. I closed the door, locked it, walked back to my couch and turned on the game. I never saw her again after that. The months after the divorce were quiet. I threw myself into work, got promoted as senior detective, started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd missed the signs for so long. Dr. Norman was recommended by a colleague who'd gone through something similar. Her office was warm and cluttered with books, nothing like the sterile environments you see in movies. So, she said during our first session, tell me why you're here. I want to understand how I let someone fool me for 2 years. You're a detective. You read people for a living. Exactly. I shifted in my chair. I've interviewed thousands of suspects. I can tell when someone's lying to me in an interrogation room. But my own wife... I trailed off. That bothers you. It feels like a failure, like I should have seen it. Dr. Norman nodded slowly. Do you think you missed the signs because you weren't paying attention? Or because you didn't want to see them? That question haunted me for weeks. You didn't miss them because you were stupid, my therapist said during our 4th session, after we'd been digging into my childhood, my relationship history, my patterns. A calm woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes. You missed them because you trusted her. Trust isn't a weakness, Jared. It's a strength that someone chose to exploit. Then why do I feel like an idiot? Because you're measuring your worth by someone else's failure. Nicole's deception says everything about her character and nothing about yours. I turned that over in my mind for days afterward. I'd spent 2 decades learning to read people, criminals, suspects, witnesses. I'd built a career on seeing through lies and deception, and the one person who'd fooled me completely was the woman who shared my bed. But maybe that was the point. We don't look for deception in the people we love. We assume the best because the alternative is too painful to consider. Nicole hadn't fooled me because she was a master manipulator. She'd fooled me because I loved her, and love makes us blind. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I got an unexpected letter. It was from Taylor Webb, Derek's ex-girlfriend, the one who'd filed the harassment complaint against him years ago. Detective Lawson. You don't know me, but I know who you are. I dated Derek for 2 years before I found out he was cheating on me with multiple women. When I confronted him, he turned it around on me, made me feel like I was crazy, paranoid, unstable. I heard about what happened, what you did, the investigation, the termination, all of it. I'm not usually someone who celebrates other people's misfortune, but I'm not going to lie. Knowing that someone finally held Derek accountable for who he really is, it means something. For years, I wondered if I was the problem, if there was something wrong with me. You showed everyone the truth. Thank you. I wrote back a brief response. Nothing emotional, just acknowledgement that I'd received her letter and appreciated her words. I wasn't looking for a connection or solidarity, but it was nice to know I wasn't alone in having been deceived by someone I trusted. A year after the divorce, I was having coffee at my favorite cafe when my phone buzzed. Amanda Holloway. I know this is strange, but I wanted you to know. Derek's getting married. Some woman he met in Arizona. Thought you should hear it from me. I stared at the message, waiting for some emotional response. Anger, jealousy, satisfaction. All I felt was a vague sense of pity for whoever this woman was. Thanks for letting me know, I typed back. Hope she knows what she's getting into. I finished my coffee, left a tip for the waitress, and walked out into the morning sun. That's when I saw her. A woman across the parking lot struggling with a load of groceries. 2 paper bags threatening to spill, keys dangling precariously from her fingers, and a purse sliding off her shoulder. She was trying to balance everything at once, and physics was winning. I jogged over without thinking. Here, let me help. She looked up, startled, as I grabbed the bag that was about to fall. Dark hair, kind eyes, a scattering of freckles across her nose. Oh, thank God, she laughed, adjusting her grip on the remaining bag. I thought I could make it in one trip. Narrator. She could not make it in one trip. I helped her load the groceries into her car, a sensible hatchback with a bumper sticker that said, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." Thank you so much, she said when we were done. Most people would have just walked past. I'm not most people, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. She tilted her head, studying me with those kind eyes. No, I don't think you are. Her name was Rachel. She taught 3rd grade at the elementary school nearby. She'd moved to Westbrook 2 years ago from somewhere in Oregon. She hated cilantro with a passion, loved true crime podcasts, and was, she informed me solemnly, absolutely terrible at parallel parking, like genuinely dangerous. The city should revoke that part of my license specifically. Can't be that bad, I said. I once backed into a fire hydrant while attempting to parallel park at 2 miles per hour. The hydrant won. I laughed. Actually laughed. It felt strange, rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in a while. And you still drive? The city bus doesn't go where I need it to go, she shrugged. Besides, I'm great at everything else, just don't ask me to park in a tight spot. Or back up. Or do anything that requires spatial awareness. We talked for 5 minutes. Then 10. Then 15. The groceries were loaded, her car door was open, and neither of us seemed to want the conversation to end. I should probably go, she said finally, glancing at her phone. Ice cream's going to melt. Right, yeah, of course. She hesitated. This is going to sound forward, but would you want to get coffee sometime? There's a place down on Main Street that does really good lattes. I'd been about to ask her the same thing. For the first time in over a year, I felt something other than suspicion toward another person. I asked for her number. She gave it. I should warn you, she said as she got into her car. I have very strong opinions about pizza toppings. It's destroyed relationships before. I'll take my chances. She laughed. A real laugh, unguarded and warm, and drove away. I stood in the parking lot for a long moment, watching her go. Something had shifted. Not a lot. Just a little, like a door creaking open after being shut for a long time. I called her the next day. I was hoping you would, she said. I was starting to think I'd imagined the whole grocery parking lot thing. You didn't imagine it. Good, because that would be a very boring hallucination. Oh, look, a nice man is helping me with my bags. My subconscious needs to do better. We got coffee that Saturday. She was early. I was earlier. We both pretended not to notice. So, she said, settling into her seat with an absurdly large latte. Tell me something about yourself. Something you wouldn't put on a dating profile. I'm not on dating profiles. That's the first interesting thing you've said. She grinned. Why not? Everyone's on dating profiles these days. Bad experience with them. Well, bad experience with someone who was on them while pretending not to be. Her expression softened. Ex-wife? That obvious? You have the look. I've seen it before. She took a sip of her latte. My last boyfriend was the same way. Turned out he had 3 profiles on different apps, all with different ages listed. Apparently, I was dating a 32-year-old, a 28-year-old, and a 35-year-old all at once. That's impressive, actually, in a terrible way. Right? He couldn't even commit to a fake age. She shook her head. Anyway, your turn. What happened? I told her the short version. Wife of 12 years. Affair with a former colleague. Found out through an anonymous tip. Divorce. I left out the details, the surveillance, the investigation, the systematic dismantling of 2 people's lives. Those weren't first coffee date material. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and touched my hand. I'm sorry you went through that, and I'm glad you're sitting here now. Even if you do have suspicious opinions about pizza toppings that I'm not aware of yet. Something in my chest unclenched. I pulled Derek's file one last time before I left the precinct that day. Terminated from the police force. Facing criminal charges for misuse of department resources. Reputation destroyed. Last known address in another state. Working private security for some strip mall. A far cry from the decorated detective he'd imagined himself becoming. His new fiancée probably had no idea who she was marrying. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd seen enough cheaters in my career to know they don't change. They just find new people to fool. Nicole was living in a small apartment across town. Lower paying job at a different marketing firm. She'd tried to rebuild relationships with mutual friends, but most of them had quietly chosen sides. Hard to maintain friendships when everyone knows you spent 2 years sleeping with your husband's partner while lying to his face. I heard she was dating again. Some accountant she met at a coffee shop. I hoped, for his sake, that she'd learned something. But I doubted it. She wasn't destroyed. But her perfect life was gone, and she'd built that destruction herself. I closed the file and tossed it in the archive box. Rachel and I went to dinner that weekend, and the weekend after, and the one after that. You're different from the guys I usually date, she said one night, swirling wine in her glass. You actually listen. Bad experiences? Let's just say my picker has been broken for a while. She smiled ruefully. I have a talent for finding charming men who turn out to be emotional disasters. What makes you think I'm different? The way you helped with my groceries. She set down her glass. No hesitation, no ulterior motive. You just helped. Because it was the right thing to do. That says something about a person. Or I was just looking for an excuse to talk to a pretty woman. See, that's what a charming disaster would say. She laughed. But you're not saying it to be smooth. You're saying it because you're deflecting. I raised an eyebrow. Are you psychoanalyzing me? I teach 8-year-olds. I can read deflection from a mile away. We talked until the restaurant closed, then walked around the block twice because neither of us wanted the night to end. I told her about Nicole eventually, about the betrayal, the investigation, the divorce. She listened without judgment. That's horrible, she said when I finished. I'm sorry you went through that. It was what it was. I survived. More than survived, I think. She reached across the table and took my hand. You seem solid. Like you figured some things out. Some things, not everything. That's all any of us can ask for. 6 months later, Rachel was sitting on my couch with a glass of wine, grading papers while I cooked dinner. It wasn't perfect. We'd had our share of arguments about schedules, about my tendency to work too much, about her habit of leaving coffee cups in every room of the house like some kind of caffeinated trail of breadcrumbs. But it was real. Nothing hidden, nothing pretended. When she was annoyed with me, she said so. When I needed space, I told her. Your sauce is burning, she called from the living room. It's supposed to smell like that. Is it supposed to set off the smoke alarm? Because I'm pretty sure that's next. I turned down the heat. It's fine. My mother's recipe. Your mother wanted her kitchen to smell like a tire fire? That's the flavor developing. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, empty wine glass in hand. Need help? I've got it under control. That's what you said before the salmon incident. The salmon was fine. The salmon was charcoal. I laughed, really laughed, and handed her the wooden spoon. Fine, you take over. But if you mess up my mother's recipe, I'm never forgiving you. High stakes. I respect that. She bumped me with her hip as she took my place at the stove, and I leaned against the counter, watching her. Amanda called me a few weeks later. Derek's marriage lasted 4 months, she said. His wife caught him with someone else. Shocking. I know. No one could have predicted that Derek would Derek, she paused. I wanted to apologize again for taking so long to tell you. You told me when you were ready. That took courage. It was the least I could do. She cleared her throat. Rachel seems nice, by the way. I ran into her at the grocery store. She said you were happy. Getting there. Good. You deserve it, detective. Jared, I corrected her. Just Jared. Jared. I could hear the smile in her voice. Take care of yourself. The last time I saw Nicole was purely by accident. I was picking up dry cleaning, mundane, routine, when I spotted her across the street. She was coming out of a temp agency, head down, clutching a folder of paperwork. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not broken, exactly, but diminished. Like the life had been slowly siphoned out of her. For a moment, our eyes met. She hesitated. Looked like she might cross the street. Say something. I turned away, got in my car, and drove home to Rachel. There was nothing left to say. No closure to seek. No victory to claim. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. Rachel moved in officially a few months later. We got a dog, a rescue mutt named Murphy who had strong opinions about squirrels and an absolute vendetta against the mailman. He's protective, Rachel said, as Murphy barked his head off at the UPS driver for the 3rd time that week. He's insane. He's our insane. That counts for something. It did count for something. Building something together, even if it was just learning to live with a neurotic dog, felt different from anything I'd experienced before. My brother came over for dinner one night, watched Rachel and me move around the kitchen like we'd been doing it for years. She's good for you, he said quietly, while Rachel was in the other room. I can see it. Yeah, she is. You deserve this, Jer. After everything. I didn't know if I deserved it or not, but I was grateful for it. "This is good," Rachel said one Sunday morning, curled up against me on the couch while Murphy snored at our feet. "This is really good?" "Yeah," I said. "It is." I thought about everything I'd been through to get here. The text message that started it all. The night spent surveilling my own wife. The cold satisfaction of watching her world crumble. I thought about Derek, probably already scoping out his next conquest. I thought about Nicole, alone in her apartment, wondering where it all went wrong. And I thought about the man I'd been 2 years ago, trusting, naive, blind to the truth. I wasn't that man anymore. Couldn't be, even if I wanted to. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the person I'd become, harder, warier, but still capable of connection, was enough. Rachel shifted against me, her hand finding mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Nothing important," I said. "Just how different everything is now." "Good different?" "Yeah." I kissed the top of her head. "Good different." Murphy snorted in his sleep, chasing dream squirrels. Outside, the sun was shining. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Wasn't analyzing every word and gesture for signs of deception. I was just here, present, happy. It had taken a betrayal to get me here. The worst kind of betrayal, from the person I trusted most. But sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing. Not because you deserve the pain. Not because the betrayer was right. But because it clears away everything that wasn't real and forces you to build something that is. Rachel squeezed my hand. I squeezed back.